from an undisclosed location, from a secret hunting spot known only to him, and the guy who told him about it, and possibly the guy who told him. It's the show all about hunting in New Zealand and around the globe. This is The Hunting Show. Now here's your host, Stephen Spargo.
Welcome along to the very first hunting show. I'm your host, Stephen Spargo. Now, this show is going to be about just that, hunting in New Zealand and around the globe. Now, today's interview is with Clyde Graf, and unfortunately, Clyde's house has a little bit of static on the phone line, so please excuse that. But we'll go straight into it rather than mucking around. Joined on the phone with Clyde Graf. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, look, yeah, g'day, Stephen. Yeah, good. All good here. But I started filming, I guess, the wilderness areas of New Zealand back in probably 1996, 1997, with my brother Steve, and we focused mainly on hunting videos. In about 2005, we were requested by some people in Taupo to do a doco on 1080, and so we did. We put together a sort of a TV documentary length expose of what's happening out in the wilderness areas, and we started in the Urewera National Park, where only about a quarter of that park has ever been poisoned, but it was a virgin drop. So we went in there with our cameras, not knowing what to expect and how it was going to end up, and we ended up putting together a Shadow of Doubt, and that was pretty much just an overall look at the use of 1080 in New Zealand. We were pretty naive, but it did give people a bit of an insight into what's happening out there. And then, I think it was about 2008, we were in the South Island filming in the Kahurangi National Park, and we came across a weka, which is an endemic bird to New Zealand. The weka was eating a possum carcass. And, we're pretty disturbed by that, because possum carcasses are poisoned, every poison drop, and it's left to rot into the hills, and, of course, 1080 causes secondary poisoning. So in that case, a weka could be poisoned by eating a carcass that was left in the forest to rot. So we took that on board, and then we produced our next film, which is called Poison in Paradise. And Poison in Paradise was a lot more brutal. We didn't pull any punches. We just went straight in, showed it as it was. We really dived off the deep end in regard to stepping on people's toes. For example, Department of Conservation didn't come out that, fuzzy like that good in that particular doco, and neither did the Animal Health Board. So the first one we did was a Shadow of Doubt that didn't point any fingers. The second one got down to business and really pointed out the problems with 1080 poison in New Zealand.
Now, we've obviously got a national audience, but potentially an international audience, and they're not going to know what 1080 is. So what exactly is 1080?
1080 is, well, it was first developed, I think maybe the 1920s, perhaps, off the top of my head, as an insecticide, but it was found to be very broad spectrum, which means it killed all sorts of insects. It wasn't specific to any insect, it just killed anything, any and all insects that would eat it. And so that was taken off the market as an insecticide, but over time it was developed also as a pesticide, because it kills anything that breathes air, and it's metabolized as you eat, as an animal would eat the poison, it then metabolizes it, and it interferes with the Krebs cycle, and then of course the animal can't get energy, and then basically dies. And the other thing about 1080 poison is that it causes secondary poisoning. So once it's been consumed, the next feeder up the food chain is in danger of being poisoned too. And it goes through to insects, birds, farm stock, pets, possibly aquatic life as well.
So what's it used for in New Zealand currently?
It's aerially applied in the form of food. So baits go out about 12 grams each, and they're distributed across the forest at a rate currently of about 2 kilograms per hectare, which would equate to about 180 baits per hectare. Now, there's enough poison in a bait, one bait for example, or two baits will kill a deer, one bait will kill probably 400 odd possums. It's very potent stuff, and it's the amount going out into the environment. Now, I'm wrong about the amount that kills possums, but the amount going out into the environment is extremely overkill. Okay, so there's enough to put. There's enough poison going out per hectare to kill 80 deer at the low dose rate of 2 kilograms of bait per hectare.
Okay. Does anything happen if they do, if they have, say, a half dosage? Does it cause animal distress, or?
Yeah, well, that is something that would happen out in the hills, is low dose poisoning, obviously. And animals do suffer because the ones we find dead vary in the amount of symptoms they show. Some are bleeding out the nose, out the eyes, out the rear ends, showing a lot of distress. Others aren't showing as much. But the problem with this way of aerially broadcasting in food is that it is uptaken by animals and birds and everything else, and some of them are partially poisoned, and then they will suffer because it is a cruel method of killing animals that can take several hours to days for animals to die.
Yeah, so what a doc actually, they're putting this stuff on the land, what are they trying to target?
The target is rats and possums, and then they rely on secondary poisoning of mustelids, which is stoats and ferrets, etc.
Right.
The problem with the stoats and the ferrets is that there's research that show that they're not being killed at the rates Doc like to have us believe, but stoats and ferrets target living animals, and so the only window they get for getting those mustelids is when the animal's actually dying, and that includes birds. So birds are dying, and then the mustelid may eat a bird and then may be poisoned, but that's sort of taking the wrong pathway. Your intention is to target the rats and the possums. Right. And so those are the main primary targets, the rats and the possums. But in doing so, you're also killing deer, pigs, insects. Research shows a lot of insects are being killed in aerial drops. And then, of course, farm stock is not uncommon. And, of course, pets like dogs. Yep. Extremely susceptible, and quite a lot of dogs die across the country every year. That's a fact.
Now, you talk about farm animals. Now, the official line, or the line I have from Doc here, is that it's bovine TV that they're trying to prevent, and obviously the dairy industry is worth $12 billion annually to the New Zealand economy. Is it really affecting the outbreaks of bovine TB?
Well, the research that we've been doing into TB is finding that TB is spread mainly on the back of trucks. So that means stock movement from farm to farm is how TB is getting around the country. Now, incidentally, I had put an OIA, which is an Official Information Act request, into AHB a couple of years ago, and I asked them how many possums had been found with TB in their carcasses, because it's, they argue that it's the possums that are spreading TB in the wilderness. But there's only been, in the last 7 years, there's only been one incidence of a possum in the North Island that has ever been found with TB in its carcass. That's the only recorded incidence, and that was somewhere near Taupo.
And that's even up for debate, isn't it, that one?
Pardon?
That carcass and the fact how it got there is even up for debate too, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm not. It's not confirmed who actually discovered those. Right. There was a couple of possums in the same area, and contractors went in and then found a couple more. I think there was a total of 4 possums or so found in that particular spot. Now, the trappers go in, commissioned by Animal Health Board or TB Free or whoever it is, and they trap these areas where there's TB found around farms. Now, just this last year in their annual report, they tested 2,600 possums and mustelids, and once again, no sign of TB in any of those carcasses. Now, to me, it's just the possums are being used as a scapegoat for the spread of TB in New Zealand, when in fact TB is actually a very hard disease to control, and blood tests, for example, are only about 90% accurate. Skin tests are only 80% accurate. Bulls don't even need mandatory testing when they go from farm to farm. They could be spreading the disease themselves, just by inseminating cows. So the whole industry, to me, there's problems. It's problematic, but the wildlife are being blamed, and they're using 1080 poison across the forest in the name of killing TB, when in fact it's just killing a whole raft of other native wildlife and other introduced species.
On that point, Doc claims that it's our unique lack of native land mammals that enables them to use 1080 early in New Zealand. And they also say it's become a vital tool in controlling introduced pests. They're claiming it's not really targeting native species?
No, well, it most certainly is, and their research they had themselves definitely shows it. For example, Kia, which is a beautiful native parrot, endemic parrot, found nowhere else in the world. High numbers of Kia die in aerial drops. Whenever they put radio tags on them, it's like 40 to 70% of Kia have died. You've got weka, big numbers of weka. Anything that's a carnivorous type species is at high risk. Moorpork, for example, we had a drop just recently up at Mount Mohau in the Coromandel. I interviewed a guy the other day. He said he's been monitoring kiwi calls for the last 5 years up there. After the drop, he did it 5 nights in a row, a week after the drop, and he said all the moorpork are gone. And that one moorpork would normally hear many, many moorpork across that whole range. Now that's what happens. That's what 1080 does. It's secondary poisoning for moorpork. Gets the rats, gets the mice, but they, of course, then the moorpork target those species and then get poisoned.
Now, in a media statement from you actually said that 1080 was linked with the death of 89 kiwis in the Tongariro forest. Over the past 5 years. Where did that stat come from?
Well, look, my point there was that 1080 poison is being used in the Tongariro National Park, or Tongariro Kiwi Sanctuary, Tongariro Forest, as an advocacy block for just Doc trying to prove that 1080 helps kiwi. But the fact for me is when I'm looking at all their data over the last 7 years, what it's showing is it's not helping kiwi at all. It's probably helping them die, in my opinion. Now, for example, between 2006 and 2012, of the 99 chicks that were constantly radio tagged, only 7 are known to be alive now, out of 99 that have been released back into there. And between 2009 and 2011, 26 adult kiwi died, and largely due to predation. Now, the interesting thing is, in some of those years when these chicks are being predated, the tracking tunnels are showing 0, but the chicks are still being predated. It's sort of like something's going on, something's not right. They've been using poison in that forest for many years, and yet you've still got all these kiwi dying of predation. And then when we go over the other side of the hill, over to the Whirinaki, and into the Okahu Valley, which has never been aerially poisoned, we find, through an OIA again, Doc has removed, and I'm not sure in the last 2 years because I did the OIA a bit over a year ago, but Doc has removed 54 kiwi eggs out of that valley that's never been aerially poisoned, taken the kiwi eggs out. Iwi didn't know about it, and neither does anyone else apart from me finding out about an OIA, and then they're being transferred over into another area that has previously been 1080 poisoned. Now, what I found out about that was that no birds have been returned back to the Okahu Valley. And that's just, to me, it's just an outrage. They're taking future populations out of areas like the Okahu that has never been poisoned and planting them somewhere else. And it's just another case of Doc and the way they do things.
It's interesting because a Doc release here says that, and I'm quoting directly from a Doc release, that 1080 breaks down naturally in the soil within weeks, and that it's almost 4 months after a drop before a kiwi death is recorded in some cases. Is that? Well,
that might be the case, but of course, kiwi are known to eat cereal-based baits. That's scientifically shown in research. 1080 has also been found in kiwi droppings. That's a fact as well. So, in regard to kiwi death straight after drops, I don't know. I don't know. I can't argue that the research isn't showing that, but perhaps they're not looking until a month after the drop. We do know, for example, when you talk about brodifacoum poisoning, which is presented in the same sort of bait, there's been many kiwi deaths with brodifacoum, because brodifacoum is what they use really in island drops and things. So the kiwi are getting the poison from brodifacoum baits into their carcasses. I can't see how they're not getting the 1080 poison to their, it's the same delivery mechanism. So, and they're insectivores, so they are at risk. Anecdotally, in drops around the country, you talk to farmers. They talk about having kiwi there, and then after aerial drops, the kiwi are, gone. That's anecdotal, but
I think we'll all agree, though, that we need to keep the numbers of stoats, rats, possums under control. Is there really a viable alternative to 1080 in New Zealand?
Well, there is a viable, because most of the work is done, if you listen to what Doc says, most of the work's done with ground control anyway. There's some very good ground control operators in the country. They do big areas, over 100,000 hectares some of these groups can do, these guys. Price-wise, they are competitive, and so it is viable. My argument is you'd go in with ground control, stop 1080 all over the country. Go in with ground control, concentrate on the key areas. You could put more huts into areas, more tracks and things, but just manage it clean and green. Definitely don't be dropping these poisons, because they are getting into the waterways, they are getting into the wildlife. From my observations around the country, filming all over the different forests, the ones that have been aerially poisoned are missing certain species of birds that should be there. Comparing it to other forests like, say, Waikato Moana, where all the species that are meant to be there are there, still there. And it's hard to sort of ignore that, when you see it over and over. And so, I definitely advocate for ground control as opposed to aerial work in all cases. It's no excuse to just use poison because there's nothing else, is what they argue.
Well, would you argue that, though, that when it comes to fur trappers, they're going to try and protect their industry, aren't they? They're not going to want to eradicate possums because that's their income.
No, because when a guy goes in for fur or skins, like in the old days when they were $20 a skin or whatever you were getting, boy, there was a lot of competition. If you didn't get them, someone else would.
Right.
They'd go in. They brought a lot of possums out in those years, but they were valuable. That's all you have to do is make them valuable. But getting back to the thing, with the aerial drops, Doc's saying we've got to go in and do big drops in the South Island because of the beach mast. Well, the beach masts have been happening for millions of years, but the rats have been there for 700 years, the bush rats. So they've been going, this beach mast is just a natural process. What will happen is they'll drop the poison, then the rats will be killed off if there's any rats, and then what happens is the rats recover very quickly. And this is proven in many research studies, and the rats will increase rapidly, and then in another 2 years they're going to say they need to do another drop. And when you compare it to the control blocks, the blocks without the poison, the rats in the poison areas could be, increasing at 3 times the rate. The odd stoat in the forest is probably it's just a management thing. Stoats mainly feed on rats, and so stoats do play a part in the forest. For example, trap forest, you'll have the odd stoat, but you have the odd rat, and you have the odd this deer and the odd pig and whatever, but you also have a lot of bird life because it's a balanced ecosystem. But when you put that poison in, you're upsetting the lot, and the fastest breeders are the rats and the stoats. They have litters, and they're the ones that come back first.
So out of all of this, there's huge pressure coming from the anti-1080 groups. Why hasn't Doc caved?
Well, it's a good question. Look, you've got... the government owns the poison factory, so it starts at the top.
Right. So,
Minister of Finance, Minister of Agriculture are the ones that are the managing shareholders, and then it trickles down from there. You've got it. It's now it's sort of like a religion almost within the Department of Conservation. Yep, 1080, it's the greatest thing we've got, and the Animal Health Board saying the same thing. What it is, it's easy, and there's big money involved with the whole process. It's easy, and it's a big industry now. I think it'd be hard for them really to probably just end it without having an impact on budgets, budgets, but we certainly, it's not something that's sustainable. You just can't keep doing it. That poison is deadly. In the United States, they were using it. I think in the 1970s they tried it, and it was too broad spectrum. It was killing all sorts of creatures, so they just stopped using it. In this country, as you said, Doc claimed that we don't have any mammals, etc. Well, we do have 30 species of native birds that are at risk from eating the baits directly, and we also have another 30 species that are at risk from secondary poisoning. Now that's Doc's research. Okay, so
yep. So if people want to find out more about your cause or the 1080 cause, where can they go?
Well, the graphboys.org or tbwild.co.nz, and then just click on some of the video links there.
Yep.
The video links are very good. You know, they've got experts there. It's not us saying anything, really. It's just us interviewing farmers, scientists, doctors, filming stuff out in the field, and that's when you get a real picture of the whole thing. It's hard for me to sort of describe it on here, but those are the two websites, the graphboys.org and tbwild.co.nz. Another good one would be 1080science.co.nz, which is put together by a few scientists in New Zealand, ones that aren't attached to any budgets, government budgets or industry players, so they're independent. Yeah. And that's quite a worthwhile look too, 1080science.co.nz.
Well, thanks, Clyde. Look, you've been great. It's been good talking to you. And look, I really hope that your cause gathers a bit more momentum, and it is strong. But hopefully these lobby groups and the anti-1080 organisations can actually make a difference.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Stephen.
No worries. Well, that was Clyde Graf from the Graph Boys. Next week on the show, we're going to be interviewing someone from Radio Spectrum Management about dog collars. And these are the dog collars that guys are using to track their pig dogs around the place, why they're illegal or why certain ones are illegal, what they're interfering, and what you can do about it. So if you've got any questions you'd like asked, or you've got any feedback on the show that we've just had, please email us, info@thehuntingshow.co.nz, or find us on Facebook. All you need to do is search The Hunting Show or The Hunting Show New Zealand if you can't find it like that. And we'll see you again next week. This was The Hunting Show, number 1. Let's hope there's plenty more.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location, from a secret hunting spot known only to him, and the guy who told him about it, and possibly the guy who told him. It's a show all about hunting in New Zealand and around the globe. This is The Hunting Show. Find The Hunting Show on Facebook and Twitter for up-to-date information on upcoming shows and topics.